Your little pack there, there's a couple of scorecards. So there's 3 scorecards, I think. So the idea is that we've got grassland, the peatland, the woodland, or scrub scorecard. So the idea is that all your lands will be scored as such. So if you've got a bit of woodland, if you've got a bit of, your grasslands are scored, your peatland is scored, the ecomogens are scored, depending on the habitat type. So each card adds up to 100, and we just divide it by 10 for the actual payment. It's a payment out of 10. So I'll just get you to have a look at the grassland scorecard. That's the green one there. Really just goes through the way that they work, and the idea here is that, and anyone that we've been out, any farmer that we've been out in the field with, or up in the hills with, or whatever, they'll say, geez, how does this thing work? And you'd say, well, look, what would you give that out of 10? And most would be, within a point or 2 out of 10. And then, the payment relates to that. So the first section here is, we call it ecological integrity. So there's 50 points going for this section. So there's a whole list of different species there. So the total, what the advisor will do, or you can do yourself indeed, is you can go out and you tick the box on whatever species are there. There's a whole load of them, and during the summer we'll hopefully do a bit of training on that and on the species that are there. Because in the same way that you'll know how many bales you might get off a certain field, we should get to the point that we know what is it worth from a program like this. So then the first one is, what of these indicators are there? Which one of these species are there? The next one is, what kind of cover of the field do they have? There's various different numbers of points as you go along. So the next one here is the cover of negative indicators. So they're things like, they're basically weeds or from a grassland perspective, things that reduce the ecological score of it, and there's a list of them there. Maybe your ragwort where that's dominating, or nettles, we usually have some sort of enrichment or whatever. So then you've got your grassland structure, vegetation structure. So that's usually straightforward enough. Is it all very, very short, or is it all very, very long and gone to just dense rushes or whatever it might be? It's obviously the mix that we want. Just on the other side then is the hydrological integrity, which is just the water quality. So the first one there is the contribution to water courses. So if it's just a dry site with no natural wet features, whatever. And again, with this, you see, we're trying to capture everything as well. So that's why it's not just the biodiversity side of things; it's the water quality and it's the carbon side of things as well. So that it's the one shop, it's kind of set up. So we run along there. Natural wet features, your yellow flag ice or something like that might have a natural wet seepage zone in that field. With a certain number of points, and then if you're touching a water course, if there's a running stream, that's full marks there as well, because it has a more important role, in putting in, on water seepage into the streams, and indeed an awful lot of fields actually have streams in this neck of the woods. Wetland indicators, so they're just certain species that would, from our list, that indicate, damper sections of fields. And then artificial drainage features. So if it's extensively drained, it will have a lower score than it would have if the drains are, we'd say, are impeded, or that there's some cover. So because as you can imagine, if it's just a clean peat drain, you get a huge amount of peat that's washed off in that, and in some catchments in other work that I've done, with relatively small areas, we've been looking at up to up to 200 tons of peat coming off some areas during heavy rainfall. So that's that section of the card. And the last one is essentially just covers, like in a grassland side of things, the kind of immature scrub, your brambles or your gorse or whatever that might be coming into these areas, and kind of maybe represent abandonment, we'd say. It's the fine balance that you want. It's not intensive or it's not too extensive either. Very often, bracken, flower, cover of rhododendron, poaching, and any evidence of any other damage to soil and water. So if you're, parking the old Morris Minor or whatever down in the bog you might lose a couple of points on that. So that's that card, the grassland card. So this is just a couple of the species on it, and again, once you're out and about, it's nice because it makes sense. This one is, you know what this one is? It was used a long time ago. Well, everything was used a long time ago as a medicine, and if it didn't work as a medicine, it would kill you. But anyway, that's eyebright. What's this one? Stephen, you should. That's forget-me-not is that one. Maybe an appropriate name. Forget-me-not. It's interesting enough, these are thistles, but not every thistle is a positive thistle. You've got negative thistles and you've got positive thistles. You've never heard the like of it. But typically your positive thistles, the likes of these that are the meadow thistle and the likes, grow singly, and you don't get them dominating very often a field. It's usually with severe disturbance you get the other thistles. Again, we'd have to look at it in the field to get the exact idea, but these would represent this one, a good setup, kind of maybe a semi-natural kind of grassland. This one is ragged robin, and the other one now. It's daisy, but it's oxeye daisy. It's the very big daisy, it's not the small daisy. So the small daisy isn't a positive indicator, but this one is, so it'd be kind of more like your more traditional hay meadow to some extent. But then there's very few fields. As I said to someone one day, it's awful expensive to get rid of your positive indicators, because every field has, nearly every grassland field in these areas have, several of them. They might be there in low abundance or high abundance, but they're usually there. This one is self-heal, and the other one is the yellow flag iris there on the far side, so they're positive ones. And then just how it looks on the ground, low quality or the lower score fields could vary from, severe poaching in some areas in very wet fields to maybe just your paddock system that's nothing but perennial ryegrass, So and again, where there's very high inputs of fertilizer, there'll be a lower score on that, and that's essentially it. So then they're moderate to high, I suppose, in these ones here as well. Maybe just a low enough sward, or else it mightn't have a very high species diversity in the case of this one on the left, and the one on the right there, this one over here, is it's becoming abandoned, and it's and that in itself is it's whatever, but it does have a lower diversity, so it's just having a happy medium between, I suppose, the management and what's just left off as such. And then you're kind of high, there's a fair whack of high quality grasslands around the place. That you might have your orchids, and this one on the left, and the one in the centre is Devil's Bit Scabious, and then your oxeye daisies in the far one as well. But the fields that have a better diversity of plants in them as well, So that's that. And then just the peatland scorecard. We just have a look at that here now. So the peatland scorecard the same, essentially. It's the same idea. It's just, you got a list of positive indicators at the top of it. Your moss layer, your sedge or herb layer, and your shrub layer. And the moss layer, well, it's self-explanatory. The mosses are the lichens, in it. Your sedges are your things like bog cotton and deer grass and, your flowers in the bog. And then your shrub layer, your heather. And ideally you'll have, all three will be there. And if they are all there, you'll tend to have, a good structure and whatever else as well. So the first one is, the number of positive indicators, and then the second question A2 is what is the cover of positive mosses and lichens? So what's the total cover of if you look down at your feet, is there mosses there or are there lichens, in the peatland? And if there's more than 30%, say there's full marks for that particular one. So the next one then is the cover of negative indicators or non-native species. So the likes of rhododendron. If you've rhododendron present, there's a mark lost, and the next one is that what's the cover of all of that. So if it's a very, very big cover of the rhododendron, it'll be a lower score. You have to be very careful as well. I mean, the lads will talk about in a minute now the supporting actions, like actions that we support to remove the likes of rhododendron or control it. But we do that with training, because you can make complete bags of it as well if you go at it the wrong way. It can just spread like there's nobody's business. Flail mowing, cutting with the saw and walking away. Yourself, if you get it wrong, you might as well shake seed, rhododendron seed all over the place. So it's very important, and environmentally it's important to get it right as well, because you kind of get one, you get one go at it really, and to do it right. So that's important to bear in mind. And then the next question is vegetation structure. So that just captures if it's just like if your peatland is like a snooker table, or if it's similarly if it's just rank sedge, millennia, purple moorgrass, if it's in that setup as well. It's a poor structure. It's either too short or just monotonously all too long. So you want the good mix of them all. So then, just on the scorecard, it's the same thing again. It's dry and wet features, surface hydrology. So that goes from heavily or significantly altered. So extensive drains within it, all the way through completely intact is this spectrum there. And then the last section is the threats. So there's burning, the amount of bare soil in it or bare peat in it, turbery, turf cutting, and and again, if there's, as I say, if someone's doing their recycling down in the bog, it can lose a few marks there as well. So just a couple of the species then. These are both stagland mosses, and they're the building blocks, or part of the building blocks of the bog itself. So that's one of the things that forms the peat. So when you get to cover those, they die, and the peat builds up over the years. So they're important, and it's interesting enough now. I'm sure you know more about it than I do. Or you might do anyway. Is that in World War I there was a lot of that packaged from the west of Ireland and sent off to France and to the front lines and whatever else as well, because it's a mild disinfectant, so sent it off in bags. I don't know if there's any market for that nowadays. But, and so then some of the heathers as well, there's several different species of heathers around here. There's 5 actually, and there's 3 of them there. Your normal ling heather, cross-leaved heather up here. It's in wetter areas. In the drier areas, then you've got the farrow one there, which is the bell heather. So they flower at different times, but it's those. And then, what's this fella called? Bog cotton, it is, 100%. So it's the whole pharmacy out in the bog, really, with the stagland and the it's bog cotton, and then the lousewort as well over the far side. And interesting enough now, with the worts, any plant that has a wort at the end of it, it has some sort of healing quality or other. The lousewort must have been, for obvious reasons. The flower of the bog bean, and then bog asphodel, the far one there. And bog asphodel is interesting. It's they say that it can give cattle, brittle bones, and its scientific name or its Latin name is Narthecium ossifragium, but ossifragium relates to brittle bones, But I think it does something. There's a chemical in it that causes a deficiency in in the bones of cattle. But that's bog asphodel, and that's only the case when it's in very, very big densities. But it's deer grass here. Get up in the higher areas, of course, pretty much everywhere. And this fella here is far side is our midge-eater plant. This fella, the sundew. So they give out when you smell the midges land it, and it closes and eats whatever. So can't be a bad thing. And then just look, this is what it looks like on the ground. You know yourself, as I say, nearly anyone that we've walked up the hills with, will tell you straight away that, oh geez, that's very good up there, or that's bad, or that's, midland, or whatever it might be. So it's fairly straightforward. From your low here of just your bare ground, with a road coming in for insult to injury, through areas that don't have a huge amount of moss cover to areas that are just properly intact, and we're all familiar with those. You're probably familiar with most of the likes of those. So then, in colleges it can be interesting as well, because, of course, here you get some colleges that will have areas that are very high quality and low quality side by side, just because sheep don't like to get their feet wet, and they'll prefer the drier areas as well. So you can get just higher densities on those drier areas. So even though a lot of the commonage can be in excellent nick or even undergrazed, other parts of it, might be damaged. So it can vary a lot as well. And then just the last one then is this. And I'll fly through this one, is the woodland scorecard. And look, it's not as if there's a huge amount of woodland around or anything, but the big thing here is that if you had a scheme that just had huge money, we'll say, for peatland, you'd look after that, and then the inside land would get damaged, or you'd remove whatever woodland for it. But the idea is that we pay the same, across all these habitats as well for the balance. But anyway, look, it's the same idea here. Really, there's the various different scrub species and woodland species, and so that like if you've got a field full of gorse, for example, there's no marks for that. I don't think you'd even get a score if it's a field just full of gorse. But if it's your willows and your whatever else as well, can score very well. And of course, then in the woodland, we're looking at the canopy heights now. But I don't think we really need to go into that in too much detail. And then just a couple of those while we're at it. There's the hazel here and the hawthorn on the far side. And then what else is that? Birch and holly. Oh, and then